I would like to move on to our final panelist today, Vivian Tomacek, who is a PhD student in the Budapest Laboratory of Sleep and Cognition, directed by Dr. Peter Simon in the Institute of Psychology at the Eötvös Loránd University in actually my native Budapest. So welcome,
Hi.
Vivian. Please try your screen share.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, this is working great. So please take it away.
Fine. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Vivian Tomacek, and my main interest is nightmare disorder and autonomic activation. Now let's get an idea of this topic by having a closer look at my title: Frequent Nightmares, Parasympathetic Activity, and Heart Rate. First of all, what are nightmares and why are they frequent? Nightmares are vivid dysphoric dreams, including intense negative emotions, usually resulting in awakening, mostly during REM phase with full alertness. Most of us have already experienced nightmares, but it's only considered to be a disorder if it occurs at least on a weekly basis. This REM-related parasomnia has high comorbidity with other pathological states and may be the result of PTSD, but in several cases, the reason behind it is unknown, called idiopathic nightmare disorder, which was the inclusion criterion in this research. The next two parts of the title were parasympathetic activity and heart rate. So let's talk about the autonomic nervous system in a nutshell. Sympathetic activity causes increased heart rate, while parasympathetic activity does the opposite. If the heart rate is higher, its variability is decreased since the intervals between heartbeats become regular. See the picture on the left. And then the parasympathetic nervous system might take over and slow down the heart rate, and it becomes irregular again. See the picture on the right. And what does it have to do with nightmares? Emotional distress can cause fight or flight response, which is a key component of nightmare disorder, since it includes the intrusions of strong negative emotions such as fear and anxiety, which lead to arousal. Normally, through emotion regulation, we can control our body response, but is this true about nightmare sufferers? Patients with frequent nightmares are thought to have maladaptive coping mechanisms, generating negative effect activating the sympathetic nervous system, which brings about changes in the heart rate and its variability. HR and HRV can be measured with time and frequency, the main methods, but one question remains. Are we talking about sleep or wakefulness? Well, first of all, we concentrated on different stages of sleep. We based our assumptions on two previous studies. Nielsen and his colleagues found that nightmare dreamers' ratio of low and high frequency of HRV is increased in REM phase after sleep deprivation, which means that the sympathetic nervous system is activated in REM sleep. In the other study, Shimon and his colleagues revealed lower RMSSD, which is the root mean square of successive differences, or in other words, the variance of the length of the intervals between R peaks or heartbeats, and high frequency right before REM phase in pre-REM when the subject's depression scores were controlled for. These results show that lower HRV, along with attenuated parasympathetic regulation, might be common among patients with frequent nightmare. So we hypothesize that nightmare disorder subjects will have lower HRV in pre-REM and post-REM phases. These are transitory sleep stages in the ascending and descending slope of sleep, exhibiting some of the features of REM and non-REM sleep at the same time, and also in REM phase and healthy control subjects, but they will have similar HRV in slow wave sleep, or in other words, stable non-REM stages to healthy control subjects. To further understand the sleep disorder, we aim to explore the differences between the two groups during wakefulness before sleep onset, this is a resting state, and the picture rating task. Our nightmare disorder and control groups had similar distribution of age, gender, and dream recall frequency. Not all the participants' data were analyzed in both parts of the study. For example, there were 24 participants in the nightmare group, out of whom 23 subjects nocturnal and 23 subjects daytime recordings could be used. They reported at least one nightmare a week in the last 6 months. There were 30 participants in the control group who reported less than one nightmare in the last 2 or 3 months. The main criteria to get into any of the groups were the absence of any other comorbid disorders or medical treatment and dream recall at least every second week. With a clinical interview, we excluded anyone showing PTSD symptoms. The recruited participants spent 2 nights in the sleep laboratory, and the second night's recordings were analyzed. The experiment involved several questionnaires, polysomnography during sleep, a picture rating task with electrocardiography or ECG, in which the participants were shown strong emotion-evoking pictures in the second evening as the habitual phase, and in the second morning as the recall phase, and they had to rate them based on how negative or positive they found them and how intense their emotion was. Segments from the ECG recordings of both parts of the research were analyzed, which were 10 minutes long for the nocturnal experiment and approximately 25 minutes long for the picture viewing tasks. In each of the following analyses, I'm going to talk about the mean heart rate separately from the HRV measures. Let's start with the nocturnal segments. Apart from 4 sleep periods, the wakeful period before sleep onset was also included in these repeated measures ANOVA model. In the mean heart rate, significant main effects of condition and group were found, but the interaction was not significant. The post-hoc tests firstly tell us that there is a medium difference between the two groups, and the nightmare group had accelerated heart rate, and secondly, there are significant differences between certain sleep periods, between wake and REM or REM and stable non-REM, for instance, proving a remarkable contrast in heart rate between sleep stages. But what about the wakeful period appearing to be a little different in the plot? Taking a closer look at the sleep stages, we can conclude that in each of them, there is a minimum to large difference between the two groups, and the nightmare participants exhibit elevated heart rate in each sleep period, even during stable non-REM or slow wave sleep, contradicting our assumption. However, they show similar heart rate in the resting wakeful period before sleep onset. With HRV measures, we have controversial results. One more time domain and 2 frequency domain measures were applied, the RMSSD, the high frequency component, and the ratio of the low and high frequency components. Interestingly, we did not find any significant main effects of group or interaction. Therefore, our results do not show any difference between the nightmare and the control groups in HRV, not even in slow wave sleep, but there is a significant main effect of condition indicating remarkable differences in HRV between sleep stages. The former was quite a surprising result, while the latter is a well-known phenomenon in the literature. As I've already mentioned, to further explore the physiological alterations in nightmare disorder, we added not only the wakeful periods before sleep onset to our analysis, but also the ECG recordings during the picture rating task. The EMOT refers to the first encounter with the pictures, while the recall part was a shorter task next morning. We found the main effect of condition significant, with the post-hoc showing that in the emotional habituation part, the HR was moderately higher. The main effect of group was also significant, and the post-hoc comparison demonstrates a little higher HR in the nightmare group, but the interaction was not significant. If we compare the two groups in the two types of tasks separately, we found that during both the first and the second encounter with the photos, the nightmare group had accelerated heart rate. With the HRV measures again, the results are not consistent. We had a significant main effect of condition in one case and a significant main effect of group in 2 cases, but no significant interaction at all. The significant main effects partly prove the lower HRV in the nightmare group and also points out that the HRV is lower during the emotional habituation task. Some group comparisons also highlight that the nightmare group exhibited attenuated HRV, especially during the emotional habituation task. What do all these results tell us? We found accelerated heart rate in all the sleep stages, that is in pre-REM, REM, and post-REM phases and slow wave sleep, but the HR was also higher during the picture rating tasks, both in the emotional habituation and the recall phases. The faster heartbeats under these circumstances could show that there is less parasympathetic control during sleep and emotionally challenging tasks in nightmare disorder, which can be linked to poor emotion regulation. However, the resting state before sleep onset was characterized by normal heart rate. This is a wakeful state in recumbent position when the subject is quite relaxed and is about to fall asleep. So it is not a surprise that the parasympathetic nervous system can successfully regulate the heart rate in this vigilant but calm period in nightmare disorder. Regarding the heart rate variability, there are controversial results. HRV was normal in all the previously mentioned sleep stages and also during the wakeful period before sleep onset. In fact, the RMSSD, which was also a time domain measure just like HR, was different in the two groups, but still couldn't differentiate them significantly. But the frequency domain measures, the high frequency and the ratio of the low and high frequency were similar in these states. However, with two measures, attenuated HRV was detected during the picture rating tasks, which were used to create emotionally aroused states, and it seems that they did, so we can conclude that strong negative emotions lead to less parasympathetic control. Some questions may arise regarding the normal HRV, like are these results a question of statistical power, or do they mean that if there aren't any dysphoric experiences during sleep, namely they sleep without an actual nightmare, then there is some activation in their autonomic nervous system compared to healthy control subjects, which elevates the heart rate and seems to be universal during sleep. But HRV changes, especially changes in the frequency domain, are connected to the presence of the emotions. Before trying to answer these questions, let me also point out one more important result of this study. We hadn't intended to compare the HRV in the sleep stages, but we couldn't help but notice the remarkable difference between them, which is in line with the well-documented phenomenon that the autonomic nervous system alters in its activation throughout sleep. All in all, our results in connection with heart rate and nightmare disorder are of high importance, since to the best of our knowledge, no other previous studies have concentrated on their relationship. Our results with HRV raise several questions which inspire us to further examine this sleep disorder. First of all, altered HRV might be a trait-like phenomenon of nightmare tremors, but there has been no conclusive evidence for that. Or it might be state-specific, related to certain negative experiences like emotion-evoking photos or nightmares. However, nightmares are difficult to spot in a sleep lab, so we are planning to examine nightmare sufferers in their own bedroom using ambulatory devices as an attempt to further understand the underlying processes in this pathological state. And these are my sources, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I had a quick question. I was wondering if you think that in frequent nightmare patients, the mechanisms underlying the appearance of these nightmares may be similar, or do you think that you're trying to, looking at the variance in your data, would you think that you're trying to tackle a problem that's extremely personalized and very subjective and could be very, the mechanisms behind the nightmares could be very different between patients? I don't know. I don't really know this literature, so I'm curious. What do you guys think? Is this something that is relatively easily generalizable, or is that going to be very difficult?
Well, it's true that there might be individual differences, especially because with nightmares, there are a lot of other comorbid disorders, or especially anxiety or depression. So it might cause individual differences, but on the whole, we were looking for trait differences in traits, so trait-like differences, which should be significant if we compare groups or if we compare to healthy control subjects.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with this, I think I will